Erased Destiny. Chapter 4. Camping in the Swamps. Merigold woke up in her own bed. She rubbed her eyes and looked around the room uncertainly. She could not believe that she had dreamt such a realistic and strange dream. For a long moment she wondered where the dream had started. It was dark outside, so she had dreamed it all. The visit to Topaz, the horse riding training, the visit to the House of Magic. She got up and had a drink of water. A purple riding robe hanging over the bed was waiting for her. Merigold stopped with a cup in her hand. Had her mother sewed the robe for her? So at what point did Merigold fall asleep? In her nightgown, she opened the window to look outside. A brown horse with a black mane and black tail was waiting for her, tied to the fence. And next to him stood Bolt. The girl was glad that Topaz would go with her. She quietly went back to bed and contemplated the strange events of the previous day.
How are you feeling? Well enough to ride on a horse? Topaz and Jargon are waiting outside, and I packed some sandwiches for you.
Great, thanks Mom. I feel very good. Why do you ask?
Because Topaz brought you unconscious yesterday. What happened? Did you fall off your horse?
I was in Sintra. I went to the House of Magic to borrow a horse from a friend. There I think I got hit by some kind of spell. I don't remember anything else.
Abella was not satisfied with this explanation. She stood in the threshold, preventing Merigold from leaving the room. Merigold pulled on green stockings, put on a creamy tunic, and a violet robe on top. She silently combed her hair, washed her face, packed spare underwear.
I'm surprised Jargon's parents let him go.
Abella tried to continue conversation with her daughter. Since she couldn't determine the cause of her unconsciousness, she wanted to at least find out more about the planned expedition. What she did not expect was that Merigold would be accompanied by two men. The married Topaz was known to be reserved towards women, so Abella was not worried because of him, but Jargon. The young boy might already be tempted to do wrong.
Me too. I'm surprised he's coming with us.
She was combing her hair, sunk in her own thoughts. Abella sighed heavily. She wanted to warn Merigold of the consequences of closer acquaintanceships with boys, but the desire to pair her daughter with a rich neighbor won in her heart. Accidental sex, leading to accidental pregnancy and all that to marriage. In 8 years, when Jargon comes of age, child support paid by Jargon's parents would be enough for Merigold to build a house, and Abella didn't mind raising her grandchild, even without Merigold. Even if Jargon dumped Merigold and left her with their child, money from his parents would make up for the wrongs. That is why Abella didn't say a word of warning.
In your apron's pocket, you had a piece of paper with a list of herbs. I put it on the dressing table, and I washed the apron.
Thanks Mom. I'll be on my way. See you tomorrow evening.
Abella hugged Merigold and wished her good trip. She gave her leather sack with provisions, blanket to cover herself during cold spring night. Merigold unfolded the crumpled sheet. Someone had written individual letters between the names of the plants. They formed the words, no one, nothing. Merigold shook her head. No one, nothing. What could that mean? She ate a quick breakfast, took the provisions her mother had prepared, noticed her father's strange absence at this hour, and left the house. A saddled horse and 2 traveling companions were waiting for her outside.
Good morning. Sorry for the delay.
Good morning. We didn't wait long. Are you ready to go?
Merigold confirmed and mounted her horse. She was relieved that the mount showed no signs of distress. It stood still, only shuffling its ears and occasionally wagging its tail.
His name is Gale. A very well-behaving stallion. I rode him for a while yesterday. Follow me. I just happened to have a buyer for waterfowl.
Merigold didn't know if Topaz was telling the truth or if he couldn't hunt the fowl a little closer to home, but she was grateful for his help. They trotted out onto a beaten track. Merigold swayed in the saddle, bouncing with each step of the horse. She clung to the black mane but did not fall off. Gale did not attempt to throw her off.
Yesterday Pillars the mage brought you to me. He left his horse and paid me to watch over you on this trip. Do you two know each other?
Sort of. He's my distant uncle, so distant that I don't know if it still counts as kinship. We've seen each other a few times. Because of Horse's aversion to me, I have asked Pylus for help. I wanted to borrow one of Horse's staying in House of Magic. I didn't expect he would offer me his own mount. And you? Why are you coming with us?
She turned towards Jargon so that Topaz could not see her reddened cheeks. The boy ignored the accusatory tone and the not-so-pleasant content of the statement. Nothing had been able to spoil his mood since his father had agreed to let him go on a trip. To enable Jargon to carry out the daring and dangerous venture, Cyril had taken Joanna out to Sintra and intended to sit with her there until his son returned. Planned escapade, especially in the company of a respected hunter, was more to Cyril's liking than he let on. He equipped Jargon with his traveling bag and forbade the boy to take anything out of it. He said that there were only the most necessary things in it, the ones that had saved his skin more than once. Jargon was asked to not lose or destroy anything. Jargon clenched his teeth. The bag seemed to weigh more than the boy, but following his father's recommendation, he did not take anything out of it. He strapped it on the back of his saddle and tried not to think about it.
I need few different soil samples for winemaking classes.
The soil in the marshes is very fertile, but acidic. Farmers used to fertilize their fields with it, although it is not suitable for every crop. Don't vines prefer alkaline soil?
That's right. Sandy loam. Slightly alkaline. Although some varieties.
Merigold wasn't listening to the discussion about vine varieties and the soil preferred by different strains. She surreptitiously created small illusions by the roadside. Fascinated by her newfound power, she forgot the purpose of the expedition. Only the name of her father made the girl turn her attention to her companions.
I would be surprised if Riglin came with us.
And why is so? I haven't seen him in the morning, but forgot to ask my mum about it.
He got into some kind of brawl when he was drunk. He didn't take it well, to be honest. Although his opponent suffered more, and now the guards are looking for Riglin. Ostensibly for an explanation, but who knows? He's hiding in your pantry.
They stopped to water the horses and let them rest. Merigold felt very tired. She walked back and forth to stretch her legs. She appreciated the agility with which the mounts covered the distance, but she found it hard to understand people who rode for pleasure.
Can you manage the collection of plants and soil samples on your own?
Of course. Will you spend the night with us?
Sure. We will split up near the bridge. You take my horse, ride along the river to the right. I hunt on the other bank and join you after dark.
The announcement of the separation worried Jargon more than pleased him. He wanted to talk to Merigold alone, but in a safer place than in the unknown marshes where, according to Joanna, snakes crawled, flies bit, and, at night, the water glowed with the bones of those drowned there. Merigold nodded and continued chewing her sandwich dispassionately. Lack of hunter's protection for few hours seemed to her hardly frightening. The approach to the wetlands was marked by increasingly dense willows, with branches bending all the way down to the ground. There were also tall grasses, streams crossing the road more than once, and the loud cawing of birds nesting in the area. In the afternoon, the riders reached an arched stone bridge. Topaz crossed to the other side on foot. Merigold rode to the right, and, leading a free horse by the bridle, Jargon followed her. Merigold wanted to get there as quickly as possible, and finally get off the horse's back. She felt every bone and vertebra of her own spine. Her thighs, back, and shoulders ached. That is why she rode cross-country, along the river, ignoring the weeping moans of Jargon, who every now and then had to calm down Patch. Gale seemed content to tread on the damp ground, moving his head steadily and wagging his tail cheerfully. On the other hand, Patch stood on her hind legs, jumped up or thumped her hooves on the spot whenever she saw something she did not know. Bolt was bothered by the lack of a rider. The relieved horse would gladly go faster, and not at all in the direction taken by Merigold. He tugged at the bridle, trying to free himself.
Do you need any particular sample of soil?
Merigold didn't want it to come out again that she was planning everything with herself only in mind. Jargon muttered that's swampy, and that was all. He had made up the story with the samples to justify his participation in the expedition and convince Cyril, who didn't require any persuasion at all.
And what plants are you looking for?
For example, calamus, for the brownish-green dye, marrow to rusty, water lash to green, bulrush to yellow-brown, and some others, but I don't remember. I wrote it down on a piece of paper.
A lot of work ahead of you. Where are we going to camp?
Anywhere is fine. I don't really care. Everything hurts me. I won't ride on horse again.
Merigold jumped down to the ground and led her mount to a thick but not very aged tree. Then she laid down on her belly. She stayed still, so Jargon thought she felt bad.
We can stay here. Place is dry and quite comfortable. There is enough of firewood and close to water. Rest for some time, meanwhile I'll build a shelter.
The sight of falling branches that Jargon was trying to tie with string and stick them into the grassy ground made Merigold smile, masking her embarrassment. She knew that his parents did not allow Jargon to leave the house, spend the night outside, or play with the children of not-so-rich parents. However, she did not expect a simple string to cause him so much trouble. She wanted to help Jargon, but he pushed her hands away. Calmly, methodically, he attempted to tie the branches together, and whenever they fall down, he picked them up. Merigold opened her mouth to say that the hut doesn't look like that, and besides, the structure would be too small for anyone to fit inside. But she gave up. She didn't have the heart to spoil the boys' fun. To not waste time, Merigold began her search for ingredients. She spotted the calamus right away, but didn't know how to get it. The long stalks protruded above the surface of the water, ready to be plucked, and between them and the girl, a tank full of silt and possibly dangerous creatures.
Don't go into the water. It's cold and dangerous. The snows have barely melted.
Merigold ignored his words. She took off her shoes, stockings, and robe. In her tunic alone, she planned to gather plants she needed, and beside her walked Jargon across the surface of the pool. His ability to cast water spells was very limited, so his boots got wet all the way down to his ankles, but he tried not to pay attention to that. He couldn't understand Merigold, who planned to bath in the lake so early in the spring. Merigold was relieved to stay on land and quickly dressed up. She couldn't do magic. She couldn't warm up like Castile did. She created illusions and nothing more. She watched Jargon picking calamus. Each stalk he watched, measured, touched. This slowness and meticulousness of his irritated Merigold on a par with his cowardice. Merigold watched for a brief moment as Jargon cut the tough stems and returned to camp. From her bag, she took out a chisel with which she intended to pry up slices of redwood bark as soon as she regained full feeling in her cold fingers. Once he had finished harvesting, Jargon lit a bonfire. He surrounded it with stones, on which he placed his boots.
Come. We'll eat something.
I'm not hungry. I don't eat 5 meals a day. But you go ahead.
The girl stubbornly ignored the burbling in her stomach. Her rations were running low, so she decided to wait with her meal until Tope's return. The chisel slipped from her hand and Merigold rubbed the skin from her palm, hitting the rough, maroon bark.
Ouch! Cursed tree.
Redwood is barked from top to bottom and not horizontally. The closer to the ground, the easier the bark comes off. Besides, this is not a chisel for debarking. I think it's for splitting stones. I have made a sandwich for you. Eat it please, while I debark the tree.
The sudden role reversal gave Jargon great joy, greater even than building a hut or spending the night away from home. Before leaving, he had checked the contents of his father's bag and had to admit that Cyril had secured himself for every eventuality, even an attack of dragons. A cloak of phoenix feathers protected against fire, and Jargon did not unpack it.
I'm glad you came with us. And I apologize, I've been unkind to you lately.
It's nothing really. I'm glad too. I've never been to the marshes. And you know what, I like it. I'd like to see some other places.
I'll ride with you when I get my Pegasus back. Horseback riding is terribly tiring.
Jargon's puzzled look made Merigold realize what she had just said. In order not to make another sentence that was difficult to explain, she busied herself with her sandwich. She watched Jargon barking the trunk. As it grew dark, Merigold sat down by the fire. She listened for the sound of the hunter's footsteps, but the insects made so much noise that she could hardly pick up the rustle of Jargon tussling with his bags. She wrapped a blanket around herself and lay down by the fire. She closed her eyes, and after a while, she slept the sleep of a travel-weary girl. Jargon laid on his back and stared at the black sky. He could not fall asleep, not only because it was the first time he'd spent the night in the forest. For the first time, no one was controlling him. No one was ordering him to do anything. No one was watching him or instructing him. Finally, no one convinced him of the disastrous health consequences of lying on the grass. He tasted freedom.